question within the spiritual community is how this concept of a new earth and unity consciousness relates to a new world order. So today I'm going to be covering the distinct differences between these two future timelines. The concept of a new world order is almost unavoidable while going through a spiritual awakening. This is a future timeline that has manifested where all of the world governments have been consolidated into a one government system, and that this system is also reflected through our monetary and financial systems, where all of the banking systems have become consolidated and centralized into one central banking system. Now, all of this trajectory is based off of and fueled by the lack of sovereignty that an individual has. So although it might sound like a unified government is actually reflective of a unified consciousness, not the case when it comes to the New World Order. You could look at it as the inverted form of spiritual sovereignty and of freedom and unity consciousness. It's a mockery of unity consciousness. It siphons our personal freedoms, our personal liberties, and our creative life force, while all the while availing itself to be for our own good and for our protection. So this one world government system is based on enslavement. It's the enslavement of human consciousness into a one world government where we actually have our freedoms taken away rather than given more freedoms, and rather than being in a higher state of consciousness, and rather than being in true unity consciousness. It's one that you could look at as an inverted form, where it's like a singularity and in the negative form of a singularity. Whereas the popular concept of the new earth is humanity's future timeline that is genuinely and actually rooted in our spiritual sovereignty once we have evolved into the state of unity consciousness. So the new earth is the aligned version of what the new world order is reflecting in an inverted way. So we have a new earth and we have a new world order. Now, new world order doesn't inherently need to sound negative, but now it just sounds plain creepy. So within the new earth, that trajectory is based off of humanity coming into a higher state of consciousness, which is going to be reflected in the external. So it's a path of consciousness, essentially. And the new world order would represent unconsciousness. So when we are unconscious, we're going to have that reflected in the external, and that unconsciousness will be mirrored back as enslavement. Because unconsciousness is such a low frequency that in order to attain it, the only way that a manifestation would be able to reflect that is in some form of enslavement. Whereas with consciousness, if it's true higher consciousness, that's reflected in our actions, that's reflected in how we treat our environment, and how much harmony and cooperation and collaboration we're in with not only other humans, but also Mother Earth in general. So it's a conscious reflection because we take personal responsibility. Now, these two dominant timelines, the timeline of a new earth and a new world order, are not really just one timeline each. I'm referring to them as though they are one timeline each for the sake of simplicity. But just know that the new earth has several different timelines, so many, a multitude, infinite amount that you can use in order to align yourself with that new earth timeline trajectory. And then the same goes for the new world order. It's not just only one single timeline that carries that future, but it's that stream. You could look at it like a dominant stream that carries out and has several different manifestations of a degenerative and unconscious timeline. Regardless of all the many different timelines that a new world order can manifest through, they all share the same dominant feature, and that is the new world order can only come into power through the total and complete domination through the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex is exactly that. It is a complex. It has many different arms and extensions to it, which is how it's able to consolidate all of the world governments into one unified single world government. So it's not just the military. Has its arms in media. Strong presence. The dominating mainstream media presence is straight into the military-industrial complex. That's its mouthpiece. So you have this military-industrial complex. This mouthpiece is the mainstream media and even some secondary media sources. They just have a monopoly on the media. And then after that, you have it through a lot of the ways that we as humans are programmed, through all the many ways that we receive programming, whether that's being influenced by images or being influenced by really popular thought forms and think tanks, all the many different ways that we as a species can be programmed and influenced. All of those come mainly, dominantly, through the military-industrial complex, through the images that we see, through a lot of advertising that we see. And then also, on top of that, what we have is a very strong feature of the military-industrial complex is our monetary system, natural resources, science as a whole entity, and religion, go figure. The religious cabal has its channels, its communication network through the military-industrial complex. So this complex has many different arms and extensions in every single arena and region that you can control the human's mind and therefore program and enslave them through. Now, when I say science is currently controlled by the military-industrial complex, I am not saying that science as a whole and sanctified entity is negative. Science can be used in a very powerful, profound, and beneficial way for humanity's evolution. It can be used in a super positive way, and it's meant to be used in that way. That is not the case when it comes to this perverted form of science that we're seeing played out and controlled by the military-industrial complex. What we're seeing is, you could look at it like a vessel, an instrument. It has negative and positive capacity, right? That's what an instrument is. You can use that very instrument for a positive way, and you can wield that same exact instrument in a very negative way. It depends on who is wielding it. So science is an instrument and a vessel, essentially, and it depends on exactly what or who is welding behind that power of source. So knowing that science is an extraordinarily strong branch right now of the military-industrial complex gives us a little backstory or a broader perspective of exactly where the motives are coming from in the science community for whatever measures serve that agenda. So with this complex, having the vast and broad reach that it does, it is even the engine behind our entire political theater, and then every sphere after that. So as you can imagine, many people are unassumingly and unintentionally working for this giant entity of the military-industrial complex who completely mean well, who are empathic beings and believe that they're doing something beneficial or at least just trying to get a paycheck. Even though it is absolutely vital to become aware of this complex, it is just as vital to also see our shared humanity with the people who are unassumingly feeding into it, because they're either have their hands tied behind their back where they don't have work, they don't have the availability to be able to work in a sphere that they would rather, and that is not soul crushing, or they're very ignorant to the fact that they're fueling this system in general. And so having that shared empathy and that shared humanity is really what keeps a being at a higher level of consciousness while they're still perceiving this plane of consciousness. So this whole complex as an entity that manifests itself as the New World Order future timeline is all summed up in mysticism under one word, and that is coercion. So you have coercion, which naturally leads a being into unconsciousness. It is what fuels a being into unconsciousness, and it is what takes away a person's consciousness. So you have coercion, which leads to unconsciousness, which creates enslavement. And all of these three, coercion, unconsciousness, and enslavement, are fueled by fear. Fear, 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 fear. How do you get somebody to contract enough into unconsciousness, into coercion? Through fear. So don't be afraid of anything that I'm telling you right now, because I'm just laying it out for you. there's no need to be in fear about it. We just need to know things so that we can prevent it and be empowered by it. Fear is the number one feature and the number one way that you get a person to step out of their spiritual sovereignty, step out of their power, and to consent and submit their power into unconscious timelines that are a reflection and a manifestation of a person being in a very fearful state and a state of ignorance and not knowing, because that's what fear is. It's a person that gets so shocked and so in this state of powerlessness that they submit their power to this new world order, this complex. And then from there, they're not in their spiritual sovereignty. They're not taking self-responsibility. They don't know themselves. So it's a whole inside-outside job. You have to be internally sovereign, meaning emotionally intelligent. You have to be emotionally attuned and aware. We have to be conscious and responsible of our external environment as well. So it's about internal harmony, which is known as healing, and it's about external harmony, which is known as consciousness. So the new earth is a new earth where we are conscious manifestors. We understand that manifesting is not just drawing in thought into being, although we use that, we're aware of that. So we don't have paradigm blindness. In the new earth, we're able to understand that we're conscious collaborators and we're conscious co-creators. So we use both the active and the passive form of creation, meaning we're understanding that in order to first create a new earth, we have to create an internal healthy environment that is able to call forth and visualize and speak that new earth into existence, but then also take the active step as well, take the actions in the physical manifestation to do wherever we feel called to do to cultivate and create that future outcome. Whereas the New World Order, we've submitted all of our power away. We think we're powerless. We're not using our creative essence, our creative spark. Here we're in too much fear, and we've outsourced so much of our own creative life force and power that we don't consciously create, and we're in a state of powerlessness, which is unconsciousness. So what I really want to drive home, the point when it comes to the New World Order, is that unconsciousness and the manifestation of coercion go hand in hand. Coercion is such a strong facilitator of an unconscious pathway that you would absolutely need that threat. You would need that type of negative force in order to sustain such an unconscious state of being. So you have coercion on one hand, and what you have on the new earth is conscious creative freedom. Consciousness, unconsciousness. Freedom, coercion. These are the two dominant timelines that humanity is faced with. Now, it's important to know that when I'm talking about a new earth, I am not selling you a paradise on earth fantasy. The new earth is an actual reality that we tap into or align ourselves with when we take conscious actions to healing ourselves, conscious actions in the world, when we take responsibility for our internal and external environment, when we participate in our own evolution. So the new earth is what we call forward and what we align with both ways, where we're calling it forth and at the same time, we're aligning ourselves with those future outcomes already and those timelines when we're in alignment with the self. So this is one where there's harmony, essentially. The new earth can be summed up as harmony. It's not something where there's never any conflict and there's no contrast and that bad things don't ever happen. That is what a paradise realm would possibly be like. The new earth is not a paradise. There's still lessons, there's still karma, there's still a dance between contrast. There's still a dance between karma and dharma. So to learn more about exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to the features and dynamics that take place within this new earth, you could watch my Grammy award-winning video called Shifting to a New Earth. The dominant feature in all of the timelines that lead to a new earth is always unity consciousness. Unity consciousness is the unified consciousness within each individual so that they have healed their own cognitive dissonance, their own fragmentation and traumas to a certain extent that they have awakened into the state of enlightenment. Enlightenment is no longer a luxury in the future, it is a necessity. So in this state of enlightenment where we realize that we are one with all others, it's not an oppressive oneness, right? It's not that monochrome singularity type version of oneness that is down the New World Order pathway. Within this version of unity consciousness and New Earth, you're creative expressions of Source. So we're actually aware that we are all different creative, unique expressions of that one Source energy. And within this realm of the New Earth, there's a knowing that since we all are one, but we're just in creative forms, we have creative freedom. We have spiritual sovereignty and creative freedom. And so within this, we're also manifesting, but our manifestations are coming from a place where they're not trying to necessarily harm other people or siphon other people's power or covertly or overtly gain a strong arm on another person in order to overpower them, okay? That's not the features down a path of the New Earth. We're consciously collaborating and we're consciously co-creating with our environment. Down a New World Order, it's all about that hierarchical structure that takes power, that siphons power, that needs to strong arm others, that needs to use coercion, that needs to use fear in order to gain power, gain dominancy. So you have very aligned power. Our creative life force, our creative freedom. We have an aligned form of power when it comes to the New Earth. And then we have the shadow side. We have the abuse of power and the domination and the negative qualities of power from the New World Order. So once again, you have this huge feature of power in and of itself being extraordinarily beneficial, being extraordinarily positive when we're welding it in a conscious way. And you have that same feature of it being used in a very abusive way when it comes to it being used in a negative, fearful-based way. So the New Earth is not necessarily a paradise, it's just the conscious participation that we all have within our own collective experience and the harmony that we're able to exhibit with the external world because we come from the awareness of enlightenment, that we are one with our environment. So we care about Mother Earth and we're consciously creating so that all of our environment can benefit, not just us. Versus the New World Order where we don't even think we have any power. We've given so much away based on fear, based off not knowing ourselves, based off of unconsciousness, based off of fundamentalism. So it's very important coming into the next few years that you yourself become aware of where you're rooted in fundamentalism. Because fundamentalism, whichever way you cut the cookie, it doesn't matter where. Fundamentalism loves fundamentalism. It doesn't matter in which direction it's pointed in. It's very aware that we become aware of where we are rooted in fundamentalism, because fundamentalism is the number one way that you get people to start resonating strongly with fear, and then you start entraining their vibration into fear, and all of that fear contracts our consciousness and contracts our consciousness until we start resonating with the New World Order, whether we like it or not. So if a New World Order is based off of fear, then the New Earth's foundation would be based off of love. Only in this sense, love in the context of consciousness comes from discernment and comes from our recognition and acknowledgement of ourselves in the other and the other in ourselves. I hope this has unified your consciousness. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.